Let's go.
You're listening to the Cage Nation TV Prizefight podcast. Coming to you from the Candid Cameron Studios in State College, Pennsylvania. Here's your host, Albert Cameron.
My name is Albert Cameron, and I feel like dying today. Someone gave me a cold, and when I find out who the son of a bitch is, well, then I'm going to sneeze and cough on everything that he or she loves. And then we're going to see how she feels, or he. See if they like it. It's Friday, Fight fans. I'm your host, Albert Cameron. Thank you very much for joining us for the Prizefight podcast. Of course, Friday also means the Friday 5 over at CageNationTV.com. This week, we counted down 5 of the most important changes to MMA, according to this guy. My opinion matters. Check it out. If not, check it out anyway. It's a good read, and frankly, what else are you doing? On today's Prizefight podcast, we're going to talk about Darrell the Saint Horcher getting called up to the UFC. Lenny Karlheim and Ethan the Wolverine Goss is going to be taking on some pretty tough opponents in a grappling tournament. Misha Cupcake Tate will be defending her title, but it's not against Holly Holm, and Chris Cyborg Justino will be making her UFC debut. One of the bigger news today is that Khabib Nurmagomedov, and I really hope I pronounced that right, will be drawing Pennsylvania standout Darrell the Saint Horcher in Horcher's UFC event. Tony Ferguson was slated to take on Nurmagomedov, but Ferguson is out. Horcher is in. The bout will take place at 160-pound catchweight. Of course, we all know Darrell the Saint Horcher as being one of the, probably the top lightweight in Pennsylvania. I mean, according to the rankings, and we're all very, very concerned with the rankings, Horcher is up there. Darrell Horcher is the guy at lightweight. I think he is currently the Cage Fury Fighting Championships lightweight champion. Well, he got the call. Uncle Dana's calling him up. He's getting his Reebok back. Something to celebrate. Now, Darrell Horcher, as a combatant, has a very special place in my memory. A lot of the guys who are listening from Altoona will remember the day he fought George Lights Out Shepard at Complete Devastation MMA 5. On paper, Horcher had 4 pro fights, a pretty impressive amateur record, but he had 4 fights. All of them that was in the Pennsylvania Fighting Championship, and if I'm not mistaken, that was promoted by Coach Steve Blackman of Blackman MMA. So Horcher had 4 pro fights. I mean, he was won the winning streak, but he was fighting George Shepard. Shepard was an M1 Global veteran. M1 Global, of course, the guys who are currently promoting Fedor Emelianenko, arguably the greatest of all time. So he's going to take on George Shepard. Horcher's got 4 fights. Shepard's got 13. 13 by stoppage. I mean, they don't call this guy lights out because he's handy with a light switch. He's got the ability to separate people from consciousness. So, Horcher's taking on Shepard for the Complete Devastation MMA Lightweight Championship. A title that the finish of the fight is actually so spectacular, you forget that it was for a title. Round 1, Horcher's holding his own against a guy with very lethal hands, good combinations, good footwork, good head movement. I believe it's in the second round. George Shepard continues the pressure. Horcher is timing Shepard. You don't know that when you're watching it at first, but when you watch the replay, he's timing him. Shepard's throwing big looping overhand rights. At one point, Shepard leans in and eats a kick from Darrell Horcher. Now, the kick that Horcher served up to Shepard, probably the closest we're going to get to a Pride soccer kick. It was legal. Shepard was on his feet. There was only 2 points of contact. That kick was legal. George Shepard got kicked so hard that Shepard didn't know where he was. He had no idea what the venue was. I'm pretty sure he didn't know what day it was. Darrell Horcher, on paper, the Vegas bookies would have salivated at the odds that George Shepard was going to beat Darrell Horcher. Darrell Horcher does the impossible. Of course, that just goes to show MMA math doesn't work. Just because a guy has 4 fights doesn't mean he's not going to beat a guy with 13 fights. But those 13 fights that George Shepard had were quality fights. They were stoppages. He had proven himself. He has a gas tank. He has stopping power. He has high-profile fights. He has traveled to Europe to fight. Horcher had only been with the Pennsylvania Fighting Championship for his pro career. After that fight, of course, Horcher goes on to Bellator, goes on to the Cage Fury Fighting Championships, and now he's headed to the UFC. So kudos to you, Darrell Horcher. This really proves everything that I've been saying for quite a long time. If you go to these local fights, you're going to see the fighters of tomorrow. The UFC just doesn't call you up and say, hey, your trainer gave you a pretty good endorsement. Why don't you come fight for the UFC? Those days are long gone. With regional promotions able to promote, that's where these are the farm leagues. Gladiators of the Cage has sent guys to the UFC. Pinnacle FC has sent guys to the UFC. Cage Fury Fighting Championships has sent guys to the UFC. Complete Devastation now clearly has sent guys to the UFC. Not as directly, but, Jim the Beast Ehlers, Darrell Horcher, Jordan Rinaldi, Jeff Smith, all of these guys have touched gloves now in the octagon. And they have touched gloves in Altoona. So when I say go to the local fights that you're going to see some stuff, I can't tell you enough. Go see the local fights. You're going to see the fighters of tomorrow. Now, it's also incredibly important to say, and I don't think I've ever given these guys enough credit, but when it comes to the fights we've seen in Altoona, I think we really need to thank Ryan Glunt and Rob Lynn for putting these fights together. And not just Rob Lynn because he's one of my boys, but, Ryan Glunt has busted his backside over bringing these guys to Altoona, recognizing the talent, recognizing the potential. Rob Lynn put on fantastic cards fights in Altoona. You know, those guys, the matchmakers. I mean, we always give credit to Dana White or even to Jason Davis or Drew Daria for putting together fights in Altoona, but they kind of bankrolled. You know, they brought the brand, but it's the matchmakers who are bringing these big fights. So if you see Ryan Glenn or Rob Lynn, make sure you pat him on the back. Rob Lynn, not so hard. He just had surgery. He's okay. He's recovering nicely. But, you know, like, we need to give credit where credit's due. So Ryan Glenn and Rob Lynn really brought those fights. I mean, it was Ryan Glenn who brought Corey Hill to complete devastation. Brought Darrell Horcher to complete devastation. So pat these guys on the back. Next up on the Prizefight podcast, Lenny Karlheim and Ethan the Wolverine Goss are going to be heading to the Indiana University of Pennsylvania, and they're going to be competing in grappling super fights. The event is titled the IUP Superfight Invitational 2016. Lenny Karlheim, the king of the Altoona amateurs, will be taking on Derek McWilliams. Now, this is about as even as a matchup is going to come. Both fighters are brown belts. Lenny, of course, having the MMA experience. When you're combat tested like that, it's kind of like a trial by fire. You have been baptized by fire. You were hardened by that cage experience. McWilliams is a tournament winner, and it's kind of ambiguous. I think he's the IUP Superfight Invitational tournament winner, but Lenny Karlheim, brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Derek McWilliams, brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They're coming together, and they are meeting for a super fight. A super fight with the IUP Superfight International in 2016. Ethan the Wolverine Goss, King of the Cage vet, Gladiators of the Cage veteran, Pinnacle FC veteran, Complete Devastation veteran. The list goes on, and NAAFS veteran. He's going to be taking on Aaron Hannon. Now, of course, Ethan Goss with all the MMA experience a guy could ask for. Hannon, a two-time Edinburgh submission-only champion. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Hannon's a purple belt. Last I checked, Goss is a blue belt. So, experience is playing a little bit. Now, what Hannon doesn't have, he doesn't have the MMA experience that Ethan Goss has. Ethan Goss, not ranked in judo as far as I know, sweeps Lenny Karlheim off his feet with a Haraya Goshi at Gladiators of the Cage, Road to Glory 7 in Johnstown, PA. Aaron Hannon with excellent submission skills. I mean, clearly, if you've been awarded a purple belt, you're going through your paces. Now, what Ethan Goss lacks in belt promotion, he's also very combat tested. Have you ever shaken Ethan Goss's hand? That dude has got a grip. And like, I've got like catcher's mitt hands. I've got like banana fingers. And Ethan Goss has probably one of the top 3 handshakes. He's got that wiry farm boy strength. And there's a big difference between being big gym strong, being in the gym all the time, working out, and then just, you know, being farm strong, where you're working outside, like you're working on equipment, you're working on like the farm, you just build that natural toughness. Ethan Goss has got that going on. That counts for a lot. Have you ever seen a farm boy walk into a wrestling team on his first year and you're thinking he's going to get smoked, he ends up going to States? That kind of stuff happens because of that natural working body mechanics. That's what Ethan Goss has got going on for him. The 2016 IUP Superfight International is being held at the Zinc Hall in Gym B at the IUP campus. No admission for spectators. So, listen, no admission for spectators. You're going to see Lenny Karlheim and Ethan the Wolverine Goss being in super fights for this grappling tournament. Think of Shamrock versus Gracie as the first super fight. That's what these guys are doing. No admission for spectators. So you want to go see Lenny Karlheim, you want to go see Ethan Goss competing in a grappling tournament, it is costing you nothing. I know of a lot of ladies who compete in grappling. Well, you get to compete for free, and it's only $25 for the guys that register. Make sure you go check out the IUP Superfight International. Misha Cupcake Tate will be taking on Amanda Nunes instead of Holly Holm at UFC 200. And I'm going to ask, it's going to be kind of blatant, but what the hell happened to the immediate rematch policy that was following forever? If anyone deserves a rematch, I think it's Holly Holm, because that fight was so close. Holly Holm got submitted in the 5th round. It wasn't a first round knockout. It wasn't a first round flash submission. That fight actually could have gone either way if Holly Holm hadn't been in a bad situation, or if Misha Tate wasn't able to capitalize on a positive situation. Normally, after a title loss, like, oh, we gotta throw these guys in again. They gotta fight again. We gotta make the money. Okay, well, what about sportsmanship? What about Holly Holm not losing in as much of a definitive fashion? But I mean, I feel like that is one fight that really deserves an immediate rematch. Speaking of women's MMA, Chris Cyborg Justino is finally going to be making her UFC debut against Leslie Smith at UFC 198. I understand, and I could be completely mistaken, I understand that Holly Holm was offered the fight and turned it down. Her camp, her judges, her trainers, her sparring partners, Jackson Wink MMA, decided this wasn't the right fight for her. Chris Cyborg will be taking on Leslie Smith at a 140-pound catchweight bout. Now, you got to ask, is this an attempt, a transition, for Chris Cyborg to get down to 135 and possibly fight Ronda Rousey, possibly challenge Misha Tate or Holly Holm for the title? We don't know. The important step is that Chris Cyborg has made it in the UFC. Chris Cyborg has the incredibly unfortunate luck of being a natural 145er at a time where women's 145 is extremely shallow. There are times you watch fights, you think that Chris Cyborg's career really apexed when she beat Gina Crush Carano. Now there's just no one for her to compete at, and we're not getting any younger. Chris Cyborg is not getting any younger. Her opportunities to be a contender is becoming more and more slim. That window is closing. could be extremely unhealthy for her to cut down to 135. Dehydration weight cuts are extremely dangerous. We've seen that recently. California says absolutely not. Dehydration weight cuts, I mean, it's taking away hydration that the brain needs to function, that kidneys need to function. More and more often, we're seeing extreme weight cuts being a bad thing. So, Chris Cyborg is incredibly unlucky if she's able to make it to 35 to contend for a title. I can't imagine she'll be at 135 long, but best of luck to her. That's my time, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me for the Prizefight podcast this week. Of course, the Friday 5 over at CageNationTV.com. Until next week, fights, Cameron, action.
Thank you for tuning in to the Cage Nation Prizefight podcast. All rights reserved, 2015-2016 Planetary Sports. The Prizefight podcast is part of the Cage Nation Broadcast Network. For more information, visit www.cagenationtv.com.